the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What draws behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, could either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
All right. Gather the brave and honest and the righteous in your corners. Word them up, word them up, word them up. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Case Closed, 4 p.m., right? When it's 4:05 right now. That's Eastern time every Sunday without fail. Sometimes it's over here, sometimes at Dr. Thunder's channel. And you see the topic. But first, most importantly, smash that like button. Share the stream. Subscribe if you're not already. Notification bell. All that good stuff. The question is Chicago heading the way of Detroit? Right? And this is no shade to Detroit. That probably makes LAR's stomach turn a little bit to think of Chicago and Detroit mentioned in the same sentence. Right? No shade to Detroit though, but no one wants to end up there, right? No one wants to end up there. And the question is, well, if you see yourself heading in that path, how do you stop it? Right? How do you stop it? Businesses are moving out. Right, but that's not only a Chicago thing. Businesses are also moving out of New York and certain other parts of the North. The South is kind of winning right now, okay? Even if you want to talk about, let's say, California and Elon Musk moving his stuff over to Austin and Texas and whatnot. You could talk about the comedy scene with Joe Rogan moving out of LA and all those other types of things. So the North and certain, perhaps Northeastern as well, and liberal kinds of environment are kind of losing, generally speaking. But Chicago is a specific case with its own unique problems and a crazy mayor, from what I kind of understand. I don't know much about her, but perhaps let's go ahead and do some basic formalities here. How's it going, LAR?
It's good, man. Here we go talking Shy City, you know.
Let me adjust this camera here. Okay, so, and can you check your microphone there, Kaizoran Empire?
Hi.
It's freaking hi. How anticlimactic, all right? You the super troll, the giga troll of the, all you can say is hi, or maybe, okay, maybe that's a move, But the way I want to kind of go about doing this, LAR, is there is a video, okay? And shout out to Glenn Lowry. We can start with a little clip, a little piece of it. Glenn Lowry, professor of Brown University, talking with this Jewish gentleman over here to the right side of the screen. And this Jewish gentleman is more of a kind of a ethnographer, sociologist, kind of studying the landscape of the people and their problems and kind of gathering the data and reporting to Glenn Lowry. Glenn Lowry, just like you, LAR, is a native of Chicago, right? He grew up there, south side of Chicago as well. And then he moved on to greener pastures over in the Northeast Brown University area now. So there's a little clip I want to just play here first to get the conversation started. Okay, so let me make sure that this is unmuted, got the volume correctly, and let's just play a tiny bit of this.
What about the working class whites of Chicago? What few may be left? You know, what I envision, you say downtown is down, you say the streets are deserted. So what I envision, I don't know if it's true or not, is a bunch of kids coming in from the west side of Chicago and the south side of Chicago, massing downtown and basically going on rampages and, you know, and making it someplace you don't want to be coming out of a restaurant at 10:30 at night at. Is that what's going on? And is it narrated like that? How does the press report it? Is there a racial coloration to the narrative that's being put forward now about what's happening in Chicago?
There is racial coloration. It's far from completely unfair. It has not very much penetrated the mainstream reporting. It occurs more in conversations on social media. There is a lamentation.
Okay, so the racial aspect is not penetrated the media. When people are talking about the racial aspect in social media, okay.
For better or worse, that the mainstream media and political authorities are scared to death of the real truth. There is a complexion to this. It's not completely Black. It's Latino to a degree. But we have what are called street takeovers, Glenn, to your point. And I should hasten to add, downtown is not completely empty, but there is an emptiness to it, which can often be seen. You're still going to have concerts in Millennium Park, and you're still going to have crowds. There are still tourists. Very often people don't get accosted, but it's more and more dangerous. So there are what are called street takeovers. This has become a thing this year where a group of youths, often largely Black, will take over a public beach or a public park. There was a curfew instituted after a shooting downtown at our famous sculpture, The Bean, a fatal shooting there. So there was a curfew instituted. It's not clear it's really doing much good. There's a street racing scene now that's very interesting, but most of all, they're, in my mind, talking about this kind of thing. There have been attacks on police. It's been a bad summer for police. It's now open season on police. Over the July 4th weekend, Glenn, it was very shocking. Numerous reports of attacks on police, video, that was just shocking. And police would come out, say, to break up the street racing scene, and people would be smashing the windshields of their cars. There was an Illinois.
Okay, street takeover, people smashing the windshields of cops, cars, and whatnot. That term street takeover does sound a little weird, though. How do you take over a street, right? Like, is a street not a public place, right? When you see a black face, if it was a sea of Asians, right? Just Asian schoolgirls with cameras, then no, it's just a whole bunch of tourists. Maybe they're weird. But if it's a bunch of Black dudes, oh my, they're taking over. But the question, and let's start with LER, is there an importance to looking at the racial dimension of this? Is it relevant at all to the solution of it? Is it also, is there any point to hiding the racial aspect of it, right? What do you have to say about what you've heard so far and the question I just asked?
In Chicago in particular, there's always a racial element. But going back for a second, I'm not a native, I'm like a transplant who left. But the interesting thing about Chicago, as far as people play the racial game, it's probably the most racist place I've ever been. And it's set up that way. Like the guy was talking about the street racing. The street racing ain't Black. He started off talking
Latino.
Yeah, but the street racing, that's normally really a white, Latino, and Asian thing. But when you start off talking about a street takeover and then you go to fighting the police, you don't make the segue to say, okay, the people that throwing the stuff at the cops, they ain't really Black. But that's one of the things that happens a lot in Chicago, where you lump in all the crime with us. You say Black first, and then you throw everybody else in there. Like Hispanics and Asians used to have a thing where, well, more so Hispanics, where when they're committing a crime, they look Black. So it was easy to get away with it. And people don't like, what do you mean? Well, if you dress a certain way at night, somebody's gonna assume you're Black. Or if you're a Puerto Rican or something like that, and you braid your hair, you're gonna be Black. So there's this thing where we do commit crimes, But other people commit crimes and try to give a black ambiance to it. So you never know who's who. So that's the, and back up a little bit further. As far as criminality in the city,
Mhm.
I don't know if people know this, but Chicago is a hub for the cartels. So when you're in a city
Mhm.
that currently is a hub for the cartels, which are Mexican or Central and South American, and you're a notorious home for organized crime, which used to be Italian, Irish, and Jewish. But the face of crime has always been black. So that's always been the dynamic, is you'll never actually deal with the crime and cut it out because the face doesn't match the actual players. So that's the thing about it.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because, let's say you're a white guy in Chicago and, you like to do a bunch of blow on the weekends or, on a tough Friday in the office, right? But, you're a lawyer, you're upper middle class. You're participating in that kind of, you're participating in the consumption of the product that's supplied by the cartel, right? And you're probably, you and your cohort represent a large portion of the people who are kind of, taking part in the blow business there. But you're not going to be down on the street, right? Doing these, manifesting the other aspects of the fact that there's a lot of crime going on. There's a lot of drugs moving through, right? The cartels it's a hub for the cartel, things coming in from south of the border. Chicago's in the middle of the country, right? That's why, right? It's Midwestern, so you can kind of distribute all through the United States. So I see your point there in the sense that there's beyond the fact that you're saying people will put a black ambience to the crime thing. There's also an aspect of you could be participating in the crime either from a demand side or a supply side, but you're not going to be the person on the street. Your face is not going to be there because it becomes a class thing, and the people in the lower classes are going to be more represented as far as those running around being quote unquote thugs. Now, guys are in Empire. You just heard the clip that was played, right? Street takeovers, the racial aspect where it's only in social media, but other people are not saying it. And the question is there any relevance to the racial dimension of this? It could be a racial or cultural dimension of it. The guy said it's not mainly black, but we know how the stats are going to turn out, right? In terms of the street level type crime. Any initial thoughts on that so far, Kaiser?
Yeah. Can you state which city that is? Chicago or
Chicago.
Okay.
Not
Chirac,
Detroit.
huh? But isn't Chicago already Chirac at this point, right? So if it's gonna be street level gangs, yeah, I don't think blacks will be the majority. But I think blacks will be a significant minority, meaning they will be the single largest race there. You
Go
agree with
ahead.
that, brother? Okay. Well, okay. So first of all, I think it's good to kind of look at the demographics of Chicago. So we can ask our trusty friend here, what is the population of blacks in Chicago?
Yeah, LAR. I believe Chicago. There was a lot of
30%.
migration into Chicago by blacks. Like, what is it like?
Yeah.
30%, 40%?
30%.
What is
right.
it? Do you know?
It's 30%, yeah.
Well,
And then the population. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
yeah, probably 30 to 30. It's like the third or fourth biggest city was with a black population. But we're not the largest. So I would say it's probably like even though we don't put Asians in most things, let's just say 40% white, 30% Hispanic, 30% black.
Right. And if that's the case, blacks also overrepresented in the crime statistics. If we look at the general crime trends, is blacks are 15% of the population yet commit 30% of the crime. So they commit 200% crime rate. Is it 100%? I don't know. 100%. I can't do my math, but they commit double the crime based on their population. So if they are 30% in Chirac, then that means they would be the single largest crime committers then, by that logic, if we scale it up.
No, I know people use that thing, but they don't actually use it properly, and it ain't just about Chicago. We get arrested more than everybody, but everybody commits the same amount of crime. We get prosecuted more than anybody, but everybody commits around the same amount of crime for roughly their population. What you're basically seeing is, and I hate to say it this way, but this is the only way I can say it. A lot of Black people are overcharged because you undercharge non-Black people. So we're getting charged because you let the other person off for probation. So that's normally how it goes. So,
and it's also a type of crime, right? If you're doing white collar, go back to my whole thing of snorting coke up in the penthouse,
so
and also maybe you're scamming people while you're snorting that coke.
That was
You're not going to get
actually
arrested.
that was actually an estimate. Well, that was actually based on the kinds of crime that's taking that into account. If you look at murder and armed robbery, which again there's usually evidence for, especially murder, it's actually up to 50%. That 15% of the population committing 50% of the murders. So if you just scale that down to all the other types of crime, yes, white people do commit more white collar crime, aka white collar crime. It makes sense. It's for them, right? But the point is, look, if we look at murder, and murder again is one of the things which the state tries to get somewhat accurate statistics on who actually committed the crime. Blacks are 15%, yet they commit 50%. That's a huge multiplication. Let's do that. Let's multiply that by what, 4 something?
And regarding whether this is true or not, because someone's already asking that, you can go to the FBI stats and all the different stats and find it yourself. Or you can go into, if you like to get your stuff from social media, you can go to all the various rooms and the call-in app. That's the app we were just talking, rooms and all that kind of crap. And you can find those stats, okay? And also you can talk about the self-reporting of the people living within the Black community itself with regards to their complaints, right, about criminality, about the rudderlessness of the youth and whatnot in their neighborhood. But yeah, go ahead and respond.
Let me, because I'm talking about Chicago specifically when I say this. Do we commit crime in Chicago? Yeah. But what's interesting about it is Chicago will normally get you a bunch of stories during the holiday season about 50 people shot on Memorial Day weekend, 25 people shot on July 4th, or 35 people shot on Columbus Day, like federal holidays, right? But what you don't, and normally there's Black people. But the problem with that is, but they'll say it's like 500, 600, 700 murders in the city. When you see those mass shootings, no one ever gets arrested. And for people who live in Chicago, it's always been funny because it's like, okay, let me get this right. You can shoot 50 people in the park, leave no gun shells, no fingerprints, nobody knows what the cars look like or the car looks like. Nobody has a description of what's going on. And this happens every holiday. And it's always, but it's put on a game. So in a year's time, you probably got somewhere between 50 to 150 people killed at about 8 or 9 incidents. But nobody ever gets caught. So when you grow up in that area, you're like, look, man, we already know how crooked the city is. You can't tell me you caught a killer because of, pictures and evidence. But every year in these same parks, in these same spots, these big shootings go on and nobody ever has, it's not even a blade of grass there. It's like, okay, that's a setup. But that's put on our community. And it's like, Black people were shot, but by who? The assumption is other Black people. It's like, not with this kind of cleanliness. So that's usually part of the dynamic that gets caught up.
Okay, so let me ask Kaiser the question about, you mentioned that it is important to look at the demographics, and divide it within racial lines. And by the way, I agree. that, there's no point in hiding things, because people like to divide by racial lines as well. So no one really cares about how many blondes went into Harvard, right? And it's logical to go ahead and find out, but nobody cares about that. There are things that people care about, though, such as the black or the white or the this or that, and you're not going to change that, so that's fine. But is it? But why do you say it's important, you Kaiser? Why do you say it's important, other than the fact that there are certain types of things that people want to know? Why? Other than that, why is it important?
Okay, very good question. There are several different lines we can take with this, right? I can take a pro-black or pro-society approach, right? Society, we know what I mean by that. So let's take a pro-black approach, why it's important. If you can truly get an accurate number, what you can kind of figure out is if the system is functional, if the system is biased against or towards a certain group of people, and if then there's any kind of remedies towards that system. So for example, if more black people are being caught by police or even arrested, forget being prosecuted or successfully being prosecuted, just if they're just being arrested more, that could tell a few things. Are the police over policing black communities? That's one. It's important to actually know these numbers. A second one is if they are not over policing them, are black people committing more crimes, and what that actually means, what kinds of crimes that they are. Are they dangerous to society? Is society actually holding them back? Is the system dysfunctional? For example, if black people are committing more crimes, maybe the system isn't allowing them to integrate and participate in a way that is legally perceived as a legally fashionable way, right? Before, the whites used to be allowed to own slaves, or just to say certain people used to be allowed to own slaves, right? That was legal. And legality doesn't necessarily mean morality. And I think it's good to really know the numbers, so then you can start to distinguish between all these kinds of barriers, access to so-called the acceptable norm way of making money, and what that means with the social games. Because every time when there's a statistically significant difference between the wealth of different groups, this is when actually one group can be exploited by leaders. By exploited, I don't mean it's a bad or good thing. I'm just saying from a functional perspective, they can be led one way or another into like some kind of civil war.
Okay. Yes. Okay. That's I like the Civil War aspect as well, in the sense that, okay, you want to know where the tensions are, the reasons for the tensions, and all these types of things. So LAR, right? Because you took the pro-black approach there, Mr. Kaizo, and you went back, slavery, legality, not being morality. That sounds like LAR song right there. Is there any, right, other than the fact that I just gave the blonde example, right? There's nothing that says, we shouldn't go ahead and start keeping track of blondes or people with dark spots on their left toe and keeping stats on them or whatever, right? We don't do that, but we keep stats on ethnicity and such. After all, it does have to do with bloodlines, and people do stay within these particular neighborhoods if they're kind of related and have the same kind of color and all this type of stuff. So it makes sense, and we like to measure against each other. Maybe it's a freaking game that we like to play. We like to, as you like to say, LAR, talk about our top guy versus their low guy, all that type of stuff. Is there a good reason to keep accurate stats about stuff like this in your mind, racially?
It's a good idea to do, but it won't pan out. It won't, and when it comes to, let's just use like criminality in this sense. Black community criminality is normally at the most 25 and under. Non-black criminality can basically go to your 40s, 50s, and 60s because of the leniency of the legal system. So for us, it's kind of it's a different animal. The things you can and cannot do, and how long you can and cannot do them. Like, I don't know if y'all, you both of you, or one of you saw the movie about Judas and the Black Messiah. The movie about Fred Hampton. That's the actual neighborhood I grew up in. So Fred Hampton was, basically the face of the Black Panther Party of Chicago. Okay. That's where you get, Stokely Carmichael and Eldridge Cleaver and all those people from. He was killed at 21 by the police. You know, he was put in jail for a time period for stealing, like, was it $41 to $61 of ice cream from an ice cream truck. That you know, it wasn't true, but they just locked him up. He robbed the whole ice cream truck, but it was like the 60s, so the whole truck came to like $61, some silly number like that. But for him to be killed by the police the way that he was killed, it was basically a hit, and that's what has been looked at by the government this whole time. One of the next neighborhoods over lived a man by the name of Frank White.
Mhm.
You might not know the name Frank White, but you know the name Al Capone.
Yeah. No bull.
Al Capone was number one. Frank White was his sidekick, his number two. In the town, one town over, that's where Frank White lived. That's the same house, that's the same person that the mayor of Chicago gave him his gun license, knowing he was a known mafia hitman. So he walked around with a gun license that was just a piece of, like a business card with the mayor saying, he can have a gun because I said so. So, and the policing from one town to the other is completely different. So just imagine where I grew up at, it's like a 21, 26 block radius. The next town over is like a 28, 29 block radius. One guy leaves the Black Panther Party, get killed by the police. The other guy, the police actually watch over and escort, and he's a criminal. So I know that was the 60s. The problem with that is 60 something years later, that's still the modus operandi. So it creates a whole cluster, you know what, of those people are like this and those people are like that, because that's how it was taught. That's how, you know, Chicago is a place where they say the Irish and it got into the police force, where you got the Italians got into construction with the mob, where, you know, so they were on the streets, in construction, in the police department, in the fire department, and they all happened. And the Jewish people were doing the same thing with the what do you call that? Being the quote unquote landlords that would charge Black people 2 and 3 and 4 times the rent. That's why Martin Luther King moved out there. The video you see of Martin Luther King getting hit in the head with a brick, that wasn't the South, that was Chicago. You know, that's the city where this prior mayor, there's Mayor Daley, he had a son. I mean, the father died a long time ago. The son became the mayor for a long, extended period of time. One of the fathers claimed the fame to being the mayor was when he was a child, he was one of the people who sparked off the race riot at the beach. You get what I'm saying? So when it to criminality, it's just a different animal. Because we can't, like, I know people who went to jail for crime, and I know people who got away with crime. And guess what? They're completely different races. That's the
now. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I went too long. My bad.
No problem there. Now, Chicago's notoriously corrupt, and that's why Barack Obama is like a very strange character in the sense that many people don't trust him, because how the hell you come through Chicago politics, okay, community organization, and then rise to the state legislature, and then come through, you came out of Chicago, become president of the United States. Go ahead.
It's not that he did it, it's the way he did it. He basically backdoor snaked Bobby Rush, who was a that's how he became a senator. Yeah. So Bobby Rush ran, something happened, he called like a recall or something. It was just something obscure that he had Rush had already won, but he made it a backdoor kind of move, and they had to do it again, then he won, and it was like, man.
I recall seeing that whole thing go down on C-SPAN. I didn't know. I mean, it was just some light skinned guy. He looked super light skinned back. It's almost like the guy darkened his skin when he became. Anyways, no, it was, what?
Chicago has been the darkest in my life because it gets so cold, you lighten up, but when it gets hot, you black.
Oh, okay, cool. So maybe they did that debate in the winter or something.
Yeah, but
Because I just saw this really light skinned dude having a debate with the darker gentleman with a kind of mustache and bald, right?
Obama's not really. His father's not really black, right? His father is from a specific tribe in Kenya, the Luos. These are Nilots. They're not black. They're like super black, right? So, you have to add an extra 25% of blackness on them. That's why he kind of looks like a black man.
Yeah, it was a perfect white man to be the first black president. But anyways, let's now move away from the racial aspect and just talk about the crime aspect, in the sense that, okay, fine, it doesn't matter who's doing the crime over there, but we know that Chicago, whether it be super corrupt or it be Chirac, is not Pleasanton, California over here. Well, not over here. I'm not in the Bay. Well, I'm in Africa right now, but over in the Bay, my other kind of locale, it's not the same thing. Okay, we know that there's a problem over there. So let's kind of go to that aspect of things a little bit. But it's still gonna be slightly racial, because after all, that's what people like. That's what people like to talk about. Let's play a little clip here. Take it away, Glenn Lowry.
How do you commit 10 armed robberies in an hour?
You've got a car. You got 3 or 4 guys in it. You target a neighborhood. You target individuals on the sidewalk. So within a 5 or 6 or 8 block radius, you jump out, 2, 3, 4 guys with guns. You seize upon defenseless pedestrians who are pre-selected by geography and by dress and demeanor. You immediately demand their cell phones.
Well, first of all, Kaizo, this is like some high IQ robbery. I never quite thought about just like a series of robberies. Like you like commit like 60 robberies in a day. All planned out like this. So you're always coming for black people being not on the ball.
Yeah, they do well, like finally. Yeah, high level stuff, man. You're gonna commit crime, make sure it's really good.
Well, let me go back a little bit
on the sidewalk. So within a 5 or 6 or 8 block radius, you jump out, 2, 3, 4 guys with guns. You seize upon defenseless pedestrians who are pre-selected by geography and by dress and demeanor. You immediately demand their cell phones and their wallets, basically, maybe jewelry, and you make your hit and you go. And when you wave the gun in their face, it's over quickly. And they've documented this, particularly at the website CWB Chicago. And there's like 8 bullet points, right, in one story. And they're like, okay, these guys hit on this block and this block and this block and this block. This is a motif.
Wow.
This is a motif. This is not isolated. This is the new thing.
Shout out, by the way, to J Bones. My bad for not acknowledging the super chat. The super sticker that is $5. Okay, you say keep it up. You're out there saying that, hey, the crime statistics are wrong and whatnot with regards to race and all that kind of good stuff. But we're getting into right now some particulars about the way the crime is committed. And I think Dr. Thunder just joined us in the back there. But I'm going to continue playing this here for a second here. Again, a series of you can get like 10 to 12 robberies per hour, in this chain robbery thing. But let's see.
In one story. And they're like, okay, these guys hit on this block and this block and this block and this block. This is a motif.
Wow.
This is a motif. This is not isolated. This is the new thing. And now it's, as I said, spreading up to like Rogers Park and Edgewater. And I mean, I walk all over the city and I'm like, damn, can I still do this? So it's bad. Yeah, it's just nuts. And carjacking is another thing. We went into the city of Chicago Police Department's all crimes since 2001 database, which is a bit of a beast to wrestle with, but I had some help. And we got the carjacking totals, armed vehicular hijacking, it's called, for like about 20 years or so. And we saw that this year we're on track to a new record. Now, we'll have to see if that pans out. We did that about a month ago. It's bad all over. Murder is down from last year. Shooting incidents are down. They're not down compared to 2019, which is the baseline year. And we're not including in the weekly FBI Part 1 crime totals, we're not including a lot of stuff, including weapons arrests. And of course, 60% of non-murder violent criminalizations are not even reported as crimes, and something like 2/3 of property reported as crime. That's as per the Bureau of Justice Statistics, right? I think that the percentage of unreported crimes is going up in Chicago, but we don't know.
I want to ask you something, because I'm impressed by the data focus of the reporting that you're doing, and I want you to talk about those unwed mom statistics that you were gathering up at.
Before we go there, let's bring Dr. Thunder into the conversation a little bit here. Shout out. Can you test your microphone, sir?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So we were asking earlier whether or not it is important to measure things from a racial perspective. And then we went into, well, are the stats really true? And, the type of crime that's being committed. And Eliar pointed out we're more arrested, blacks are more arrested or more charged and all these other types of things. We looked at anecdotal evidence or data from this gentleman here to the right of Glenn Lowry, talking about street takeovers, right? He did say in the beginning that it's not mainly a black thing. He implied, and also the data would imply, that it is black, number one, and then Latinos. Eliar would say, well, that perhaps it's equal, but it's kind of hidden because of
it's not possible.
But that being as it may, that's regardless of that, is there a legitimate reason for talking about this from a racial perspective? Is there any validity to hiding the racial perspective also, right? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think it's only relevant. It's relevant with respect to who are living in particular communities. So for instance, if we know that there is a lot of crime in impoverished neighborhoods where there's not as much policing, where there are these zones. You guys probably have watched the series, the HBO series, The Wire, where in Baltimore there are certain sections of the town where they just let them do whatever they were going to do, right? So with respect to who tends to live in the impoverished communities, it may be, a source of, certain kind of data that you could actually use to perhaps change certain dynamics or whatever. But other than that, really, most of the crime issue it's basically a combination of two factors. One of them has to do with poverty, lack of access to, resources. And then the second thing is father absence. To the extent that fathers are not present and the family structure is destroyed, you're going to increase the number of violent criminals that come from those communities, and then they'll be taking advantage of the young boys that don't have guidance from fathers in the homes. So I think it's a good information source from that perspective. We know that this is not genetic. It's not a genetic problem. It's not because you have darker skin. Oh, right. Because you have darker skin, then that means that you're going to be about that life. No, it's not that at all. It totally has to do with the resources.
How do you know
and the way that the economy is jacked. Yeah.
So, Dr. Thunder, I think Kaiser is asking you here. You can't say that that it's not genetic, right?
Yeah. How do you know it's
well,
not genetic?
Okay, so let's talk about Black people, Black Americans. So when Black Americans actually have resources, and when we're in the middle class, upper middle class, we're not committing those kind of crimes, right? Now, I just was on a panel last night where I was saying that there's aspects of dysfunction that reach all the way up in the Black community, all the way from poor people, all the way up to, wealthy people. And that's why we have to let this thing burn and rebuild something more positive in its stead. However, with respect to crime in particular, there's much lower incidents of crime. We black folks tend to be law-abiding folks. There's a small percentage of young men that tend to be raised by single mothers that are creating most of these, most of this crime. And so it looks like it's, see, black people, they're committing all this crime. Really, what it is a small percentage of black folks.
Couldn't you say that the blacks are predisposed for single mother households? And that's the genetic element that makes them more prone to commit crime. This is the same thing with the Caribbean.
I don't know that's true. Is it? I mean, I think to the extent that there have been common issues. So, for instance, there's a lot of similarity in the UK as far as the dynamics in the black community, and the same thing in the Caribbean, right? But it's the same
Germany,
recipe of combinations.
Sweden and Norway.
Right, but it's the same recipe of combination. It's the same combination of stuff. Yeah.
Fair enough. And I think that, I just wanted to make that, kind of scientific point there of not being sure of something before, and you may never be sure of it, but you can't say that you're sure of it. And then I like how we've kind of broken it down to the relevant aspects, actionable aspect that you can say, okay, you can say, hey, you can burn and rebuild something that's more functional.
I brought up the Italians and the whites that were, marginalized.
But I think, you're right. And it's kind of a part of a particular, there are different recipes you could say, different acid and bases that you can join together to form a particular reaction, right? And it may not necessarily just be the black forms of the acid and the environmental base that you can, but they could be an Italian acid, and then, but that kind of a thing. If to the degree to which all this kind of determinism is true. But anyways, let's back a little bit away from this kind of talk for a second, and let's talk about this single motherism that Dr. Thunder alluded to, and then we'll get GC's point on it, and then we'll go around the panel again with LAR and whatnot. Okay, let's take it away.
The reporting that you're doing, and I want you to talk about those unwed mom statistics that you were gathering up at municipalities around Illinois, because I thought that was so interesting. You want to talk about that for a little while?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, at WirePoints, and I want to give great credit to our team at WirePoints. And there's a guy there. There's the founder, Mark Glennon. There's the president, Ted Dabrowski, and our boy wonder data analyst, John Klingner. They're a great help to me. But what we did is we reached out to the State Department of Public Health, because I was frustrated, Glenn. In the book I did, What Next Chicago, I was able to uncover City of Chicago data on the percent of births to unmarried mothers by race, but only up to, I think, 2008. So, of course, I was, scratching my head going, where's the more recent data? So it turned out it lived with the State Department of Public Health, and they were very cooperative, and they had it from, I think, census sources. And it turns out that in Chicago, as of 2020, 82.4% of births to Black women were to unmarried mothers. For Latinos, 56% of births Black women were. As of 20.
Okay, let's hear that. Let's hear all the stats down to the Asians before we start reacting. Hold on.
2.4% of births to Black women were to unmarried mothers. For Latinos, 56% of births to mothers were to 12% of white births were to unmarried mothers in 2020 in the city of Chicago, and 10% of the births.
So it's 10 and then 12, and then it jumps all the way to 50 for Hispanics, and then it jumps to 82.
Come on, LAR. You can't be coping anymore, man, because I think you've been drinking.
So let's start with LAR. Well, you know what? No, let's go to Game Changer first, since he's the first that came in here.
Okay, fair enough.
And then we'll have LAR kind of respond. So, Game Changer, you just heard what was said recently. So I want you to kind of let's start from this particular point here. We have crime statistics. People say, it may be, it may be wrong, or this or that, different types of crime. Dr. Thunder came in and said, hey, father absence probably has something to do with the types of crime that you're committing. Okay, because again, Kaizo mentioned, and I like this point very much. I think Dr. Thunder has a video about it, that hey, there is ethics, there's morality, and then there's the law. Okay, right? And perhaps if you don't have a father in the house, you're going to be breaking the law, in a low-level, wrong way, maybe more violent or stupid. Okay, but and that's fine. Let's say, but the point here, game changer, is if you want to quibble about the stats of the crime, can we quibble about the fact that there's this single motherism going on at 82%, and what is there a direct correlation? What does single motherism lead to and all that kind of stuff. Give us your thoughts, game changer, and then we'll go to LAR.
Absolutely. So if the general question is, does single motherness lead to criminality? The answer is most certainly yes. When you are a single mother, what's going on? First of all, you're already somebody who draws outside the line, and you are encouraging. That is your only primary sense of authority, influence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is someone who is breaking societal rules, so to speak. And chances are, especially at 80+%, your neighbors are, your neighbors' neighbors are. Pretty much, you have a neighborhood full of where all the adults, all of the people who have authority over you and your friends are people who do not respect the production cultural norm. Also, for a young man, there is a significant amount of social pressure to earn at a very young age. When you are a single mother, a single mother is more prone to just say, hey, I need some money in this house. Why don't you go out and figure out how to make some money for me at 14? Help put some luxuries, help put some food on the table. And that's generally speaking what the welfare system is breeding. Because what's going on is welfare covers the essentials, food, shelter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And however, it doesn't cover any basic luxury expense like weed and alcohol. So that has to come from someone else. And whether it's a temporary boyfriend or two, whether it's anything, he doesn't have to be high earning. He just has to be able to afford weed and alcohol. Once you get into that particular, yeah, exactly. So yeah, you should go to the hood and drive up and say, here you go, like, and see what bites. It won't be pretty, but anyway, you do that. So there's a lot of young men under the pressure to earn at a very young age, and criminality really is the only modern way to do that. If we lived in the past, typically these young men would go out and do some agricultural work, and they would work someone's field or something like that, or they would work their own field. Nevertheless, there was work available for young men at this point in the major cities, which is where Black people live and congregate. That's not the case. If you grew up in Oakland, what are you gonna do? You're 14 and you're being pressured to make money. Your mom is gonna look the other way. Shout out to Tupac. Even though I had to sell rocks, it felt good putting money in your mailbox. That type of thinking is what a young man is. So it's definitely breeding criminality. The welfare system and the single mother culture that has resulted came about as a result of the welfare system.
Okay, LAR, right? We could quibble about the stats on the crime, but can you hide single motherism? Did you hear the 82%? Now, first of all, what do you think about the stats? Secondly, what do you think about what the stats can lead to? Dr. Thunder already said that, hey, it is likely to lead to X, Y, and Z. Game Changer buttressed that point. What are your thoughts, LAR?
I'm gonna back up a little bit and I'm gonna cover all that. I'm gonna keep it short, concise though. When the guy was talking about the robberies, right? If you change the race of the robbers, you extend how short or long that robbery can happen. You can't have a car of 3 or 4 Black guys going block to block, robbing 10 people in Chicago. Not gonna happen. That's something that could probably happen with Asians and whites. Hispanics don't get the side eye. They may make 1 or 2, and then they're gonna shut it down. So the process of people think about criminality, he was kind of backwards. That's something that white kids could do that other kids can't do, especially in that environment.
Why would that be the case? Is it the case that the cops are just going to ignore the white kids robbing people?
Not necessarily ignore them, but they blend in. Being white or being Asian is still called model minority status So their criminality blends in because you don't look like a criminal. You get the excuse of, oh, it might have been somebody else. It's not you, you know. So that's what allows people to do more crime. That's what I was getting at. Like the people who commit more crime are the people who are able to do it on a regular basis. They're comfortable. We're uncomfortable committing crime because we don't get away with that much. But the single mother stats, I actually was talking to my lady about this morning, especially in Chicago, because Chicago is a gang city. The interesting thing about the gang dynamic and criminality is a lot of young guys get in gangs and they wind up, quote unquote, using the old TV reference or rap. You putting in the work. But those young kids don't know the guys that they're taking instruction from or orders from, what it used to be, because I was there when they had to change the law. You get kids to do crime for gangs because they go to juvie and they're not tried as adults. So no matter what they do, the most they're going to do is be in juvie till they're 17, 18. But then, like when I was a teenager, they changed the law to try teenagers as adults. So you would get a lot of guys who you could say from single mother households who were crash dummies, as we used to call them. Mm-hmm. They're willing to do anything to prove themselves and prove like I'm a man now, to the point where they're gonna crash themselves to a life sentence. Like I was in high school with a guy who got 41 years for a body. Let's just put it like that, because he wanted to prove he was, tough, and he was 16 at the time, I want to say, because they just changed the law. The other thing about the single mother households and the numbers as far as other races, I hate to say this, but I'm not giving it's not overwhelming, but it's a good portion of that single mother households. I would say about 20% is the dad ain't black. So that's, we do focus on us, but a lot of times the dad is Italian, the dad's Irish, the dad's Hispanic, the dad's Asian, and the fact that the dad's Arab, but they write off the kid, write off the girl, and they don't say anything.
Yeah, but the mother's black. Oh, yeah, so it's born to black women. So right. Other women are having babies by other races, but they're go ahead.
But what I'm getting at is that percentage of guys never count. It's all black men blamed for fatherlessness. So for what I'm saying, 82% household single motherhood, got it. Out of that, probably about 80% probably black men, got it, or people who would be deemed as black men. The other 20 not black men, but I can guarantee you, all 100% is gonna be us black men leaving these kids. It's like, nah, but I get your point. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
All right. Man of tomorrow. Thanks for coming up. What you got to say on this, sir?
Okay. As somebody who used to be in law enforcement, there's a couple things that are going on here that we need to be conscious of. That has nothing to do with this discussion. Black criminality is treated differently. Hello? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Am I still talking? Okay, so black criminality is treated as something way different than white criminality is. So what you have to realize that I hear some music playing in the background from somebody.
I'll turn it
I don't hear it anymore.
Give me a second.
It's the stream music, that's all.
It's the stream music.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay, all right. So I get very confused when there's music playing, but we have to understand that this the actual ability for this to be discussed properly, you have to be able to decide. Crime is its own statistic by itself, regardless who commits it. But black crime is highlighted far more than any other crime from any other group of people within this country. period, because they're trying to make black people look like they're far more a criminal element than anywhere else. But there is no case where affluenza actually helped a black kid get out of trouble after murdering 4 or 5 people like it did in Texas. There is no, this guy went in and shot up a school full of people, also in Texas, who didn't receive the death penalty, when anybody else who committed a crime with one person involved in Texas receives the death penalty. So whenever there's black people involved, there seems to be this overabundance to prosecute things differently. I think that we've lost the ability to be able to prosecute these crimes and give sentences. I think all this stuff should be done by supercomputer at this point, to get a fair analysis of what the actual punishments for crime should be. Because due to everybody's belief, everybody lives in Democrat, liberal-run cities. If you want to live in an actual organized society, if you want to. And now, if you don't want to, you can definitely live in conservative society where there is no organization and you still gonna get the short end of the stick. So with this actual issue right here, whether Chicago is becoming the new Detroit, I think that those statistics serve as a warning to not procreate with those type of women from those type of environments. And if you end up with those type of women in those type of environments, I don't really give a damn about you or your kids in that factor, because you created them with those specific people when you was given warning shots via the statistics that these were going to be the likely outcome of things. So the discussion is around, is it coming, but this city, no. Are you going to have different and better outcomes given the statistics that are out there? Because I can run through things off of Martin Luther King and Colorado Boulevard. What's going on in 5 Points? I could go over the things that are happening in Houston, San Antonio, where my sister lived. I can go over the home invasions and all that kind of stuff. These things happen everywhere, but they're only highlighted when their black people are involved. We've already been given warning shots that if these people come from these type of situations and standards, this is what you're going to have to end up with at the end of the day. But all like they never concentrate on the Portsmouth, Ohio, the Mansfield, Ohio. They never concentrate on the actual Springfield, Illinois, where these actual West Virginia, multiple places. The drug use is up, the murder rate's up, the crime's up. Exactly the same statistics. They are not actually categorized as criminalistic people. It was the circumstances that those people were in. So we have to treat crime as a separate issue and take the color out of it.
Okay,
that's the only way to be able
to
tackle this issue.
And you mentioned that you're in law enforcement. You also mentioned that organized society, so a dense intercity type where you have systems tends to be a liberal thing, all that kind of stuff. Now you have this situation, single mothers, blah blah blah. What instruments can be used? You say it's a warning shot to not end up in Detroit status. If the parents are not going to do it, can the police do it? Will the teachers do it? Or is it, now it's got to burn and rebuild?
Yeah, well, they're going to be over-policed because of who they are. Because they're trying to cascade the actual crime statistics from making it seem like it's an everybody issue overall, which that's what crime is, rather than it being centered around a specific group of people, which it certainly isn't. No one talks about the white-on-white crime rate, the Asian-on-Asian crime rate, the Latino-on-Latino crime rate, because those things are proximity-based. So is black-on-black crime. But if the only thing you talk about or focus on is black-on-black crime, and you leave all these other statistics out of the way, especially when it comes to Native American on Native American crime, who the hell are they going to commit crimes against? So you have to be able to be like, look, crime is an overall statistic by itself. Are there precursors? Yes. But you have to be able to stop funding these actual systems. Because the black-on-black crime issue funded by the single motherhood rate, the same system applies to every other group of people that come from single-parent households. Those single-parent households, regardless of how high or how low it is still a problem societal overall. But if you over-police people more than anyone else, those actual statistics are going to be far higher. And if your actual judges in these courtrooms represent the dominant society and it does not represent the actual people that they're policing, those numbers are also going to be far higher. That's why you have to treat crime as a separate issue by itself. I think that most cops giving $500 or $600 in their pocket on a credit card can do a hell of a lot more in these communities than actual packing guns and actual armored vests. Because what they're doing is they're actually dealing with issues that are outside of the control of those people. Like if these people were given, okay, let's say that you're the son of one of these people in one of these unfortunate situations. If you was given a guaranteed 100% way out of this situation, I'm talking about through job training, you can spend less money on policing because this person is in a magnet type of school that ferries this person all the way to the productivity piece. Because most people commit these crimes on the behest of older individuals. These younger people don't know what they're doing when they're out there. They're taking the responsibility of higher class individuals. But at the end of the day, most of these things can be solved at a very low level if you wanted to solve it. Now, if you didn't want to solve it, it's going to blow up into the problem that it is right now.
Makes sense. So over policing, and just to give a piece of an anecdotal kind of deal on that is, I've lived in different types of neighborhoods, and in one particular type of neighborhood, I was always getting in trouble. I was always getting pulled over for my tags that were expired, and I couldn't afford insurance and blah, blah, blah. And then, I moved to Orange County, okay, better neighborhood in California, right? So one of the richest counties over there. I was still kind of the same type of person that I am. I was still kind of speeding or whatever the hell kind of traffic crap I was doing. But I wasn't pulled over, right? Because I was in a black Cadillac CTS and in Orange County, and nobody looks at you when you're in a black Cadillac CTS in Orange County, right? So that point is real. I've experienced that for sure, right? So I want to play. Go ahead.
I do have to point out that they don't count because you're light-skinned.
Okay. So so let me respond to something in the chat by WIGWE. I'm actually basing this on the actual punishment that people get for the same amount of crimes in other communities. That's what I'm basing it off of. When somebody gets in trouble for something that they get in trouble for in the black community and the equivalent white community, this is the actual quote unquote punishment that they get. They get an actual start on actually focusing on the productivity piece and not ruining and damaging their lives and making sure that there's not going to be another chance for you. That doesn't happen with black people. This is the punishment for the same crimes that goes on in other communities. Like, you would know that if you was part of the actual system and if you actually arrested people. I've arrested people. I went to these actual trials. I seen what these people's punishment would be. And I'm like, how come they're not doing this over here? Where we at? Turns out I'm looking at the same kids 7-8 years later. Holy crap, it actually worked. While the people on the black side of town don't get nowhere near these type of opportunities. So what I'm saying, it's a two-pronged deal. They are born in a bad situation, yes. But what are you trying to create going forward? Are you trying to create criminals going forward? Or are you actually trying to create an actual system? If this person messed up their life, or maybe messed up somebody else, there's some restitution from the actual person, but we're going to repair the actual person itself. Now, people may look at this like, oh, this is a liberal thing. I'm like, no. These things happen in conservative areas. Very conservative areas. People don't get not nearly the amount of time or anything that people get in black, normal, liberal areas. So I'm comparing the actual outcomes of the punishment for the similar crime versus the crime just being a crime itself, and you just leave nothing to statistics and you don't know what goes on in other areas of the city. That's the only thing I'm comparing.
MOT, what were you saying with this $600-700 in the cop's pocket? Could you expand on that?
Yes, like most of these things that most of these kids are going into these grocery stores and stealing for, like the basic essentials and all that kind of goofy ass shit, can easily be taken care of by the police. Easily be taken care of. If it's some food type of issue or some shit like that, that some kid is jumping into something and doing, you seen it on YouTube all the time. Shit get millions of views. That should be an ability that people always have. Now, after that is over with, you pull the mother in and be like, hey, you're going to have to face some type of consequences for this action. We're not going to damage this child's life because of your life decisions. So that's what I'm saying, is making sure that there's some type of setup to where that's not actually happening. So, because most of these children are stealing for and on the behalf of the family, when a child shouldn't be put in a situation like that. This is a parental issue. That is
it definitely is.
Actually moved on over to the child. But go ahead, sir.
But how does giving the cop money help with? I'm like, where does that come in?
So that way you're not spending money incarcerating people for even more money, $35,000-$40,000 a year, incarcerating people at juvenile detention. Are you aware of those type of statistics?
Yeah.
So
how
what
much
you're
that
saying
is?
better paid and better trained cops that have
Yes.
price conflict resolution type stuff, cops that are
Correct.
kind of like
Correct.
yeah, that's what he's saying.
Because-
Are you sure he's not saying just the police pays for the kids' stuff that he's trying to steal? I thought that's what he's trying to say.
No.
That's
What I'm actually saying is that it does look like that, but you're actually saving a hell of a lot more money by educating the entire like if you set up this system right now, this would be less and less needed as time go forward. Right now, we're spending a hell of a lot more money incarcerating people and doing all this other shit. I'm not saying for a long term. I'm saying starting off, this is what you do to mitigate those actual financial things, because I'm looking at it from a financial standpoint, how much money we waste on locking up and so-called correcting people when it doesn't do anything of the sort but spread this actual problem throughout other generations. Now, I understand that it is hard to look at because you guys don't have the background to even look at all of the statistics overall, but it is very expensive to lock up anybody for an extended period of time. And if we're going to be spending the money, I'd rather spend a least amount of money correcting an actual issue overall and setting up actual things. And instead, like, listen, if it happens too many times, as soon as the kid out the house, I want the mother locked up for life. Period. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
go ahead, sir.
Go ahead. Right quick, LAR, if I may, please. I will say right quick that whatever you pay somebody to do encourages that behavior. It doesn't end it. So it
does end it after a time, sir. It does.
Well, okay, so they have food stamps, but they still steal food. I mean, basically, let's look at it like this: we're paying them to not be criminals, and they will eventually understand that the only reason that the cops are paying them is because criminality exists. They know that once the criminality stops, the money stops.
I haven't said that. Okay.
I'll
go ahead. Okay, so having said that, do you know how much it costs to house these actual people who end up in these unfortunate circumstances?
Too much.
Okay, if we're talking about spending less money overall, which we're all here for, I say punish the mother after we corrected the situation. It's a far easier and a dollar by dollar thing to actually correct the actual system and actually not set up a system to where this is going to be something like that in the first place. Like I said, you set this system up to correct the actual issue at the minimum level, and then you raise the actual level of consequences afterwards. I'm not talking about the welfare system that we have now. The more kids, well, in certain states, the more kids you have, the more you actually get paid. I'm trying to put an end to that by just saying, look, let's pay as much as we need to at the forefront to make sure that this stuff is going to happen. Like me, I think people need a license to procreate. I'm sorry. That's where we at right now. But I'm just saying that with a license to procreate, you're going to spend all this minimal money up front to make sure that you don't have these outcomes over a grand specific period of time. So I'm looking at it over a lifestyle type of thing, and while y'all looking at it from a quarter by quarter thing. I can actually do a whole actual live stream on what I'm actually talking about, so that way you can bring your numbers to the table of how this cheaply is going to be done, and I can bring my numbers to the table on how this cheaply is going to be done. The reason why this sounds like Spanish to people is because I used to be in law enforcement and I know how these things work, and most people talking about this issue don't give a damn about how this shit works. They just don't want black women getting welfare. That has nothing to do with the actual issue. Everybody across the board gets welfare. It's just that if you combine welfare gotten with an over-policing problem, this is the actual outcome that you're going to get. But we can solve all this shit by just treating crime like crime and treating a solution like a solution. And the actual things that happen on one side of the tracks happen on the other side of the tracks. That's how this stuff is actually done. And if you have an actual level of participation and care for this actual situation, you would be repeatedly doing after actions report to make sure that we're on the right track. There really wasn't that with welfare, because they was trying to protect most other communities and just police ours as the problem. That's how we got here. I'm just trying to talk about how we get out of here. Go ahead, LAR. I'm sorry.
It's all appreciate it. I'm gonna try to condense this like 30 years, 30, 40 years into this. People created the criminality, whether they liked it or not, especially with young black males as far as work ethic. See, and I'm using Chicago as a reference. There was a time where young brothers go to the grocery store and can I carry your groceries for you? Can I cut your grass for some money? Can I shovel the snow in the wintertime for some money? I can't pay for a haircut, so can I just be in the barbershop and can I sweep the hair around and pay for my haircut? You had all of those in an over policing sense. You ran off the boys because of the face of criminality. That was the super predator era. You know what I'm saying? And then the kids started, okay, well, how about if I get on the L? L is the subway. So you got kids on the subway. They're begging, they're asking for money. They're begging for money. You can tell they're young, they're starving. They're out at odd hours at night. And this goes on in multiple cities. But so now they can't do anything productive to get a buck. And back up a little bit. That's initially when they took away newspaper routes. Kids stopped having newspaper routes because grown men was taken. So now you took all of their work ethic away from them, and every time they try to do something for entrepreneurial spirit to build their own, let's just say lemonade stand type of work ethic, you called the cops on them. You ran them off. You kicked them in the butt. You cussed them out. Guess what happened as they got older? Well, since you ain't going, I'm going to take it from you then. Because I tried at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. I'm supposed to just starve out here because my parents don't know how to act? I don't think so. And then people turn around and go, I don't see the problem. Why don't these kids have a work ethic? Part of the reason is because you've already showed them that a work ethic doesn't pay for them.
Well, okay, I agree to a certain extent, LAR, but here's what I noticed with things like that. Because growing up, we had things like Project Yes, which is what I was a part of. Basically, it was a summer program at the end of which they gave you $200, and you, as a kid, as a junior high student, you did work. They took you to beaches and you picked up litter there. You knocked on doors. You gave awareness about recycling, things like that. So you get on the bus, you're with your friends, and you do it every day. And at the end of the summer, they pay you. Minimum wage at the time was $4 and $4.25. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of work, and they paid you. And the program was designed really to keep people off the street. Now, what I noticed with the program is that because even at that age, we already had, young street dudes, like you say, they target them young so they can go to juvie as opposed to going to jail. The program seemed to attract people, young men like myself, a young man who under any circumstances wasn't really for the streets at all. If the program didn't exist, I wouldn't be in the streets. I would just figure it out otherwise. None of the young D-boys or whatnot were in the program. It really just helped those who didn't have that mindset already.
Here's the thing.
Okay, so one second. First of all, let me acknowledge some super chats and make a quick comment, and then you can take it there. I didn't want to play a little clip here, but shout out to the super chats over here. One below says it's from Chicago, but let me go ahead and read. The first one is from Gyogami. Gyogami says, greetings, great discussion. Thank you very much. $2 super chat. And Mr. Dick Thug says, I live in Chicago, and there is no denying the fact that criminality is somewhat celebrated and seen as a temporary rite of passage. This transcends poverty and all that kind of stuff. So a couple of things to say here. There's a general kind of like cultural thing that could be said, and you can say that ad nauseum. But on the side of, okay, what does one practically do, and what are the, shall we say, institutions? What kinds of levers do these institutions have? What buttons can you push, and what are the effective buttons? What are the ones that are most efficient with regards to saving money, for example, the way MOT was saying? What you're saying, game changer, and what LAR said is on one side of the ledger, which is like, okay, you're trying to encourage people, perhaps who are already going to be good, to take certain pathways. And then what MOT is saying is, okay, these people already, maybe you want to punish the mother to avoid certain types of situations, right? Or shall we say incentivize in the short term, so that, if the mother's getting punished, maybe they're not going to be as many single mothers and all those type of things. But also when the criminality is actually happening, you just treat it as crime and say, hey, what is the most efficient way to do it, as opposed to a certain type of over policing or under policing, all that kind of stuff. Just wanted to say that, but go ahead, Eliar.
The thing about what you were saying, Game Changer, I understood, but the vast majority of people, I remember when I was coming up, didn't have the resources to even get to the bus to get there. They wouldn't even know about those kind of programs. Now, I don't believe that poverty, quote unquote, causes criminality. I don't believe that, but it damn sure will frustrate you. And the problem is when you get angry, even if you're doing the right thing, you can be doing the right thing and not be in gangs. I was in Chicago for 8 years, and I was never in a gang. I was a neutron. All my friends was in gangs. All my friends was drug dealers. Some of them was chiefs. Chief is a term for a gang leader. So what winds up happening is the poverty and the frustration, you might get into it with a fight because, you need to stop messing with me right now because I ain't ate in 2 days and I ain't in the mood. But that fight could turn into you can't get into college because you got a felony. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah.
All your friends
okay,
were.
Let me say this.
All your friends were criminals, but somehow the stats are exaggerated.
Well, let me say this about let me say this about the mentality of a young man. Because, okay, believe it or not, I did my share of dirt. I wasn't affiliated or anything like that. I never did anything that would be major. The things that I used to steal when I was a younger man was in my later teens, I stole condoms. Not because I couldn't afford them, but because I was too embarrassed to buy them. I shit you not. I was too embarrassed to buy them. I always felt that the person at the counter was judging me. So I stole. And I also stole dye for my pants. As weird as it sounds now, they had at Rite Aid, they had dye. And I stole that. And I also stole pens, writing pens. Because back in the day, you ask a girl for your number and you pull out a fancy pen, it makes you look like a big shot. So those were my primary things of stealing. And I will say, if somebody gave me money, and in some cases, I started working at Burger King. If somebody gave me money, I still would have stole those particular items. I always felt that they were just too expensive to pay for. Like $9 for a pen, even if I had $9 in my pocket, just wasn't something I was looking to do. So I don't think they give it. Okay, in my instance, now I never got caught, fortunately. My friend got caught, and what they did was at Rite Aid, the guy killed his dad. That's all.
Let me ask a question to Kaizo here. You're over in England, and then now you're in Kenya, and you're looking at the solution that Man of Tomorrow gave, okay, which is if I'm putting words in your mouth, let me know, Man of Tomorrow. The aspect of, well, pay the cops a little bit more and train them a little bit more, such that they have, conflict resolution, whatever, and they have these other partners that are able to take the kid aside and say, okay, we'll put you over here, and we go to the parents, and we kind of, in other words, and you're spending less money that way. And also there's the aspect of the over policing and then the overcharging, and that this is all just a big clusterfuck. Now the incentive is to keep it that way, because once things start going, and then you have an industrial system around it that makes it such that, people don't want it to stop. And it tends to be the case with any kind of bureaucracy anyways. But any thoughts as to what MOT here says? Because I've heard different kinds of versions of it.
I have something else to add to that people don't know about when it comes to police, when they first come into being a cop, period. When you first become a cop, you do a lot of free work for the union, a lot of free work that you're not paid for. So most cops work 12 to 16 hours a day the first 2 or 3 years out there. Like especially on the weekends, working private parties, all this type of shit. The unions get paid money for these young ass cops to be out there working their ass off for other people's things. I want the police just to do police things. I don't want the police to be doing nothing else but the police things. So when those police get from doing those 4-hour shifts after their 12-hour shifts, they come and they take it out on the actual community where they're over policing. That's what I mean by compensate people like professionals. Like, this is a whole punishment thing. They're being punished by their union to make them do a whole bunch of work outside of them being a cop just to be a cop. Then they come and police the actual community where they're allowed to vent their frustration out on those people without any type of due process. So there's a lot more that's going on with the police than them just over policing people. There's a reason why that they're actually doing it. First of which is they don't have any actual interaction with these people. Policing should be a local thing. If you're going to be policing an area, you better have grown up in that area. I'm talking about 10 miles square mile radius. Because here's the thing. The police are normally I know in Denver, it was one police officer to every 50,000 people. And then as they added more people, it was one police officer to every 10,000 people. Now, 10,000 people within a specific area code, you could produce a police officer from that actual community. I would ban people who don't have any interaction with the actual community that they're actually policing to be policing over there in the first place. I don't think policing is actually special. I think that you can find people who are within this actual community to be a police officer, regardless of background. There's tons of people, places everywhere who don't have any criminal background that can actually do this job. Those people are turned down. I was turned down a whole bunch of times until I became it because, oh, you got education and all this kind of stuff. Why you want to do this? They just thought that, hey, this guy's not going to protect our power source. Once you start going through that actual system, you will know that most of it is about protecting their actual power and working these dudes for a hell of a lot for free than it is the actual policing and taking care of people. Because I think that communities would be safer the less these people stop looking like mech warriors and shit walking around the actual community that they claim that they want to protect. And then you have all these underlying issues that are going on below that. So there's a lot going on within the circle while we're trying to cover one aspect of it over another. It's like there's a lot of things that are going on with the police that people have no idea about. That turns out to be a punishment principle. And actually, I forgot the lady who was in the chat, but she made the actual point that it is a source of cheap labor. Yes, there's a lot of people in Parchment, Mississippi, who's actually doing a hell of a lot of work for corporate America for the cheap 75 cents an hour. Them dudes get out of prison, haven't been working for that company for 5 or 10 years, can't even get a job making $60,000, $70,000 a year for the same job that they was doing for these corporations for free behind bars. We got to cut all that shit out. You got to make locking people up the most expensive thing that you can possibly do and rehabilitate these people as early as particularly possible. You have to change the actual revenue stream from the actual trying to just lock people up to correcting these problems before they could become even bigger problems. I'm okay with police being paid $75,000 a year and just doing the police work for 8 to 10 hours a day. I don't want them doing nothing else but the police work.
I like it. So, Kaizo, what do you think about the kind of the granularity of it, the kind of practicality of it? Not only has he talked about, handling the crime in a particular way, he's talking about the inner workings of both the police union, to use this phrase, which I don't like, prison industrial complex. I don't like those phrases because they always make it seem like some bullshit, whatever. But what are your thoughts? Again, you don't have to be in Chicago or even the United States to have an idea or an appreciation for these types of solutions. What does your intuition tell you about this?
Yeah. Well, I think the main issue that sets America apart from other countries is you guys have guns, right? So that already kind of sets everything up culturally different. In the UK, there's no guns, right? Apart from the special police that set off after special kinds of crime being committed. So what that means is the police always has to have a level of threat. If I was a police officer, I'll shoot any dusty person, regardless of race, before I let myself be shot. But anyways, that's irrelevant. I agree with the point about the culture, letting people from the same culture police you. I think that's the strongest point. I don't think paying them is going to change anything because this is an internal culture problem rather than a money problem. We have the same issues in Kenya, right? People think paying the police more over here will reduce corruption. Nah, what will happen is you just have a different kind of corruption. The corruption itself is the issue. Paying people more money won't change that. I think if you change the culture from inside, aka having what brother said about employing people from the same community, and then building like a culture around that community being set in a certain kind of way. Yes, I mean, look, the so-called army will probably do a better job policing than the police, right? For various different reasons.
Correct.
They're better trained.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yes, but I think it's really the culture, right? Forget the training; it's a culture. It's the fact that they're taught to do a job in a certain way. I guess that's training. But the point is, it's a culture. I think the biggest point that he made that I agree with is the culture. Employ people from a specific area to police a specific region. What do you think sheriffs don't, do as much of these shooting and stuff of unarmed people? Right? There's a reason for that. It tends to be more of the police from the, more of the, what do you call it?
Yeah, sheriffs have to get elected. They're better trained, better educated. They have to get elected. They're more. There's many things that go into that.
Right. But they're also from the same community. They're policing the same region, and there's a jurisdiction there. The other polices have to be chosen from this community, and then they also have to build that culture around actually protecting this community, because there's a big point of bias that the brother brought up, right? Yes, 100%. A white group of police officers, even if there's black ones in there, one or two, culturally, they will never see a black person as the same level of individual to be protected as the other person. There's always going to be that bias of, that's my people. And this is true over here in Kenya as well, right? Like when Somalis are being, Nigerians, they're being policed, do you think the Kenyan police treat Nigerians fairly? Of course not.
Yeah, no one likes Nigerians. We know that.
Of course not. Right, but it's also the Somalis as well. Over here, there's obviously racialization based on tribal lines. So no, all these things. Let's just talk about gender just before I let off the mic. As a young black man in Kenya, I'm going to be over policed. My aunt told me this. Everybody knows this, right? My cousin has drove off the wrong side of the lane, did some weird cry shit. She got out of it. I got accused of a fake crime, right? As a black man, trust me, you're going to be literally over seen as a criminal element anywhere you go, right? And America's going to be worse because now there's the drastic racial element. And I think that's a significant thing. What the brother said is they let you off. When I say let off, they don't mean they let you off. What it means is there's a familiarity of, this is my brother, and then you kind of try to talk to them or engage in conflict resolution differently than you would with someone else who's not of the same tribal affiliation. And in this case, tribe is race, right? Yeah, 100%. Get people from the same culture. Yeah, I guess you can pay them more also. That will help it, but I don't think that would be the solution. The solution, I believe, is the cultural thing.
The training and the pay kind of are part of the same thing. So it's not about the pay. It's about the fact that you get it. You get it.
Yeah, there's incentives.
Pay,
right.
pay and training go hand in hand.
Right.
The more you train somebody, the more they tend to get paid. Anyways, let me play something, and then we'll go from right to left. MOT and then Game Changer. Go that way. But let me play this a little bit. And this is we're over here in this part of the conversation now that I'm about to play. They're still on the level of talking about the police. The police too lenient. Are we too tough on crime? Shall we limit qualified immunity? If you don't know what that is, maybe MOT can explain it a little better when you react. But basically, that the cops, in the normal course of their duty, right, which is to cuff this person, arrest that, blah blah blah, they're kind of immune to certain types of let's just say lawsuits or legal repercussions if it was indeed in the normal course of their duty, and then and such things, right? But let me play this little clip and let's see.
Reform, and I am going to put scare quotes around reform, a bill that is mostly already enacted. It was passed, and what it will do is effectively eliminate cash bail. Now, there's a great thrumming controversy about what the bill really says, but that is certainly a piece of the perceived end of days here. We're fact-checking the fact-checkers on that, and we're finding that there will be a very, very high bar for a prosecutor to retain on high cash bail, to detain on high cash bail a violent offender or any offender come January 1. There's also a thrumming debate about whether detainees before January 1st, who are still in there awaiting trial on high cash bail, will be let out immediately or not. And many of the state's attorneys, and we've been talking to state's attorneys and getting their help parsing the actual guts and innards of this 749-page bill passed in the waning hours of a lame duck session. Yeah, like the healthcare bill. They had to pass it to see what was in it. So that's a concern. And one piece of that bill that's already enacted, Glenn, which goes to the potential breakdown of society here, is that they appointed a committee to investigate whether to end qualified immunity for police. And that is leading already, contributing with other factors to the exodus of police from law enforcement agencies all over the state of Illinois. That's big. You probably know that qualified immunity is basically a doctrine where a police officer cannot be personally sued in a civil proceeding by an aggrieved subject, like someone he arrested, cuffed, maybe even used force on, if he is within the legal bounds of doing his job. So the contemplation of the end of qualified immunity, even though it has not been ended yet, just the contemplation of it is a huge red flag to many police officers. So there are many things that are leading police to lay back. We are in the throes of major depolicing. There have also been 8 felonious killings of police officers in just the last 3 full calendar years. Illinois vaulted to 6th highest nationally among the 50 states, and I think 4 territories for which the FBI gathers data on that. We reported on that recently at Wire Points too. So there's a lot of stuff coming at the citizens and the police, Glenn.
Well, I can hear the other side, Matt.
So
Okay, so
let's
go
go MOT
to correct
then.
everything this guy is saying. These type of people are not allowed to be on national TV anymore. Ever since they're not allowed to be on TV anymore. The type of person that you're talking to is a right-wing person who's pro-police and who's okay with the unconstitutional abuses, just so long as police don't get killed while they do it. Like what they're talking about is they want to like the actual immunity that the police receive. It isn't even from civil liability. It's from criminal liability within their own departments as well, which he failed to actually bring up in any type of capacity. Like that's what they mean by immunity from prosecution. Like most prosecutors won't even try to prosecute police within their own jurisdiction, nor would they try to, and even if they did, nobody from the police department is even compelled to even participate in any type of investigation that happened, right? So it's like what happened during like the George Floyd situation was a pretty much a first time thing where people inside the department, people who did police training, the actual detectives, the investigators, everyone involved with the police apparatus and was able to testify against fellow police officers. That's what actually happens within the military. That's what actually happens with the federal government. That's what actually happens with most sheriff's departments. But this is why people from the local thing actually don't get to go to any of those things because of the way they act on the local level. That's why they refuse to bring those people up from those local levels to those federal actual things, because I was federal law enforcement. That's why they refuse to bring those people up, because their level of local corruption is so high is that they will make people look incredibly stupid by trying to cover for most of these acts. So that's why they just wholly just don't even hire these people, period. So for the next thing that this guy is actually talking about is just that if you're actually punished for a crime, it makes the community much more safer. Okay. Most of these police officers, they don't want to be filmed for any reason. The only people who are trying to get out of the policing game are the people who don't want to be held to any level of liability nor responsibility. Those are the people I'm okay with losing. I don't care about those people leaving. By the way, I think it makes the community safer because any police department, you know, privately and other words, is always 2 or 3 individuals who's doing the most amount of the corruption within the force, not to include the undercover police officers. It's always 2 or 3 people, the same 2 or 3 people that's protected by the entire union. And also, police officers don't have the actual ability to, they don't have whistleblower protection. People forget about that. You have to go through the chain of command to complain about anything when it happens to your fellow officers. You don't have whistleblower protection. You have to go through your same chain of command to snitch on your fellow officer. And guess what happens when that happens? You end up not being a cop in less than 6 months. They'll make up some stuff if they have to. Like, this is what I mean by This is why people don't know any of this stuff. This is why I'm saying I have to lay down a level of education about how this stuff actually works to see how it's easy to just focus on the people who end up being criminals at the end of the day. But that's a hell of a lot of corruption that are going on from top to bottom with the actual police that they actually get to cover by just over policing one group of people over another.
Yep.
Is bail a significant factor? He mentioned the removal of cash bail.
Bail is its own. Bail is its own level of corruption itself. Like the police decide who gets bail and who don't get bail, who get to walk out under their own recognizances, given a ticket, and who don't give a ticket. This is what I mean by set standards for set rules that are in place. Police can just take your ass to jail because they can do that with every single crime, or they can write you a ticket for every single crime. Can you guess the amount of people who go to jail versus not? Whenever they feel like it. I don't want something like that in the hands of a police officer whenever they feel like it, because it ends up being over policed with the same community, because they have, believe it or not, police have a certain quota that they need to hit. I believe in quotas. Just make the quota 0.
Yeah, that's a
have
really
a
good
quota,
point.
make the quota 0. And guess what? You're going to have to make it very specific, like us, especially when I was in the military. If you wrote somebody a ticket, you have to show up to federal court to actually explain yourself. If that guy won that case, you're leaving without stripes. Lawyer or no lawyer. So you better have that shit in line whenever you try to write somebody a federal ticket on a military installation for speeding and all that other shit. You better make sure that you are 100% correct in what you're doing. Because with us in the military, there was guaranteed consequences. Nobody gave a damn about buddy system, none of that stuff. This is why actual bringing out the National Guard makes sense, because they're going to treat everybody equally. Police are not even trained to treat everybody equally. They train to treat people how they want to treat people on the level and scale of power that they get to actually dispatch or not. With the actual cameras, with the actual police department, you can actually see how they treat people based on the clientele who it is. Yeah, you can see how they treat a white lady, a black man, and a white dude. You get to see that on an hour-by-hour basis. None of this stuff is ever brought up in court. That's what I'm saying about these people don't even believe in equal protection under the law, but they go into law enforcement to punish specific people. It's ridiculous.
That's true. I agree. I agree 100%.
Yeah, go ahead. It seems like you have a point, Kaizo, and then perhaps react to the artificial intelligence point. A man of tomorrow mentioned it in passing, and it does bear upon what he's talking about right now, right, with regards to
the issue with
you can bring in
AI,
the National Guard, or you can use AI. But well, go ahead, react to that.
Well, the issue is we can't use AI yet, right? We can't use a civil system because so far the AI is being trained on racist data, and there's a lot of research on this. So what we need to do is we need to actually make data. We need to create data set that's not racist, so that they can actually do this accurately, right? And everything you're saying about the police, how the police functions, it's all true, right? I've experienced it, right, from a different context, different country, but it's all true, all of it. The police will choose, the buddy thing, for example. Let's say shooting going wrong. Of course, they're going to be like, okay, the gun was here. Yeah, they can plant evidence because they're the only people there. Body cams can go missing mysteriously. All these things are 100% correct. And the worst part is the system is not designed to have like a unilateral sort of treatment for everyone. And of course it isn't. That's just not what it is. The kinds of people that go to police system, it's already a self-selective group. It's either going to be people who care about their community or people who don't like a certain people from that community, and they're going to want to heavily show them, okay, I want to show you, teach you a lesson. All that stuff is true. And I think, so what are some of the solutions over here? Yes, I think having an AI that is trained on good data will definitely help significantly. If the data set is not corrupted or extremely biased, AI is going to help, because what's that going to do is it's going to allow us to kind of predict. The issue is it's a prediction. You look at the sentencing, right? For the same crime, people argue and say, oh, priors, no, that's nonsense. Same crime, certain groups are, being given 20% more harsh sentencing, right? Certain genders are being given 20% more harsh sentencing. So all these things are correct, and they're correct in every single country. It's not just America, right? You look at the minorities, or what they classify as minorities, right? Compared to the large scale group, there's always going to treat the minorities, again, if the culture is of a certain kind of way, because the police are just kind of low level civilians who have been somewhat given power. Of course, they're just going to use it to an extreme sort of point. So yeah, I think AI, National Guard, those kinds of people, they're going to help. The issue is they're not gonna be what the community sees as culturally integrated. Now that's the issue. There's a lot of people who like to feel like the police is one of them. They're gonna feel a little bit too robotic, but in general, yeah, solving some of these issues, it can definitely be a great step towards it.
So Game Changer and LAR. Okay. So I played a clip there, and the clip was talking about, hey, they're trying to pass this bill that is going to, shall we say, take away qualified immunity, which we kind of understand what that is, and also talking about, the bail system, the removing cash bail, and it seems as though that MOT, you generally agree with the spirit that there's something kind of funky about the bail in terms of the fact that the cops get to choose. And that if things were kind of generally equal, that it seems like you're generally like an equal, if it's equal, predictable, all that kind of stuff, that's fine. It's not gonna break anything.
But can't you get bail from court though? I thought that's how the system works.
Yeah, but they can give you a ticket. They can give you like a site release type stuff, or am I correct there, MOT?
But that's only like 4 days. Keep you there for a couple of days before they process you to court, and then
Yeah, well, I can explain the process. Like, giving a ticket is no different than going to court and being told to come back to court for another hearing. That's what a ticket is there for. A ticket is there, but like, okay, we made a claim against you. You're going to come back at a specific date or period of time and actually defend yourself. Or the police can take you all the way to jail, book you, fingerprint you, do all that stuff to you. And pretty much when you get your initial court hearing, they let you out of jail. It's literally the same process. One process just takes a hell of a lot period of time than the other. And one involves fingerprinting and all this kind of stuff and holding people for no reason. I don't believe in the bail system. I believe, look, the police made a claim. They took evidence. They made statements. They got to write a police report. Hey, man, you know what? We'll see y'all in a week or month or 2 months or whenever. So that way you can answer toward this charge. Now, things are quite different for like armed robbery and murder and arson for other types of other things. Those things I won't handle completely different. But these low-level offenses, bro, just write a ticket and get up out of there. You got the dude's ID, whatever. You got his face. You can find out who they are quite quickly with the NCIC inside your car. There's literally no reason to try to take people to jail unless you're just trying to be a dick over some minor shit. And of course, people gonna go crazy if they're going to jail over some minor shit. Don't nobody want to go to jail over some claim that some person made. Listen, if your ass is guilty, 100% guilty, your ass is going to jail eventually. Okay, so there's no reason to lock somebody up right away unless they're a threat to themselves or the community or something else. I just think that this whole vacuuming up people off the streets and putting them in jail and leaving them in there for the entire weekend is something that don't need to be happening unless it's a loss of life type of scenario. And that's something that needs to be written in stone.
I can't argue with that. LAR or Game Changer, do you have any reactions to any of the points on the table here? We have AI, we have the bail situation, and we have on the one hand, people are talking about, we need to be tougher on crime, and they just use that word tougher to mean whatever we're doing now, do more and more, and any of this type of, hey, let's kind of remove the qualified immunity or change the bail system. It seems as though, now you're letting Chief Keef run wild in Chicago, killing people. Any reactions to that, LAR and then Game Changer?
I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna have to get out and do something real quick. If you want to slow down crime in Chicago, the number one thing you have to do is gun running. And that's where the policing and the bias starts, because basically what you get is notoriously or stereotypically, you get white men going to Indiana, Idaho, Kentucky, what is that?
Wisconsin, right across the border.
Wisconsin, Tennessee, and they get to come back, whether they go into gun shows or gun stores and buy a bulk of guns and just drive back to Chicago, and they're selling them for double, triple, quadruple, quintuple the price, and it's on the streets, and now people getting shot because the quote unquote criminals, they can't buy them legally, but because in Chicago got probably the third strictest gun law for you to even get a legal license. So when you buy these guns and you bring them back, the police know who's doing what. But when it comes to that running the guns, because it's not considered running guns for some odd reason if you got white people doing it, and then they go, why are all these shootings happening? It's the same process that happens with the drugs. It's just people look on the back end of the things and the drug aspect, but they never look at the transportation aspect because who's transporting it doesn't fit the description of criminal, even though they know who's transporting everything. So it makes the whole situation look suspect because it's like, okay, you know where all this stuff is coming from. You know the type of people who are doing it, but you won't arrest them. You'll arrest somebody. And I'll say this even with the gang, the kids in the gang. It's at the point where gangs are not, and drug dealing isn't even about money on the street level, because you can say a lot of guys spend more money on a gun that they got than the drugs they do that they're trying to sell. So they're not really making any money like that. But that aspect of it, that not being policed on purpose, in my opinion, causes a lot of these problems because you let people off the hook with a crime to blame somebody else for another crime. It just makes no sense.
Elio, let me add something to that. Like the federal, like the NRA, the National Rifle Association, has repeatedly lobbied all governments to not track gun purchases. So what LER is actually talking about, if this serial number is ending up in these people's hands, like, okay, Chicago isn't nothing but like 20, 25 miles from like the Indiana border, maybe even 15 in some places. Those people go across the border to Indiana, go buy a whole bunch of guns, sell them for quadruple, quintuple the amount in Chicago, and they're not even tracking where the gun purchases and buyer are actually coming from. Even though the gun. Go ahead.
Hold on, I apologize, but the reason why I'm saying it this way is because, and I'm sure MOT knows this, I could go to the same gun show and I can't buy those same guns. That's the interesting thing. Like, if I showed up to a gun show, even here in Texas, if I show up to a gun show here in Texas and I got $5,000 on me, and it's another guy who's a white guy in front of me, he got $5,000 on, and he said, I want 5 of those guns. He gonna pay for the guns, bada boom, bada bing, they gonna let him walk. I do the same thing. Look, we gotta search you, we gotta research you, I need some fingerprints, I need your license, I need.
Yep, background check and everything. They get to choose who they get to do it against at these gun shows. That's what he's talking about. So
that, think about a guy can make hundreds of thousands of dollars because of the what do you call it, the good old boys club.
Yep.
Because I just bought 5 guns for $5,000. I'm gonna sell these suckers for 40, and I only probably, and even if they rolled me up, they could have just rolled me up for 1 gun. So, because it's a bulk purchase, he bought no serial numbers like he was talking about. But if I do it, they gonna get all the serial numbers off all the guns, all the purchase, name, address, DNA. You know what I'm saying? Evidence. So if I tried to sell that thing, I would definitely be caught. So,
and also LAR, you have to understand that when they run your information through the NCIC, when they pull you over, that is attached to your damn ID. That's attached to your ID when they pull you over. They know you bought a gun on what date and from where. They know how many that you got whenever you buy them in this specific type of situation. Now, people don't know that that's the case. And how come they come back drawing down on you and acting all crazy and shit? Because they know that you got a gun on you because they see that you made a purchase. Like a lot of people don't know how that system works either. So there's like a lot of systems that are in place, but all this stuff can be actually tracked with everybody being treated the same way. But you are correct, LAR. Most of these people from these sheriff's departments go and buy up all these guns and go sell them to other people, make a whole bunch of money, and the money just vanishes and disappears out of nowhere. Like a lot of things are kind of intertwined, but the only thing that we seem to focus on is black on black crime. But there is a lot of things between the A and the Z that could actually mitigate all of these other things. It's a lot of them. So it's a lot of it.
All right, so we're about to start landing the plane, and I know you said you got to leave LAR, but let me go ahead and play this last clip here. Unless before I play it, Game Changer, you had something that you want to chime in with regards to the things that have just been discussed, AI and okay. So maybe I'll trigger MOT a little bit because this thing is a little bit kind of.
Well, I'll just say this right quick on AI.
Go ahead.
I think it's a great idea, but I don't think that that we're ready for it. That the technology is ready for it, rather. There are certain factors, but however, having a entity that can't be biased make judgments is can be a real thing. However, it does take power away from judges, and since judges would be the ones who actually have to implement something like that, I don't see it taking off.
Gotcha. The judges have to die off first or something. Okay, so this is the last part of it. This is having to do with, let's say, leadership, right? Because we talked about all the kind of shall we say, the institutions, and as I like to say, you kind of like the levers and the buttons in the institutions, the incentive structures within the institutions. Well, obviously these institutions can solve all the problems that the parents can solve that need to be solved in that regard. So MOT has like some stopgap measures, to solve problems in the meantime, and then in the long run, blah blah blah. But ultimately, you don't want to have this single motherism, regardless of the color type stuff, and mixed with over policing and all that stuff. But let's talk about, let's say, leadership and role models. And that's the last part. And I was saying that it might trigger MOT because it kind of sounds a little bit like this culture warrior type stuff. Let me play this for a second.
Still so much.
Okay, I got to ask you a political question. Mayor Lori Lightfoot, is she not up for re-election?
She is. The first round of the nonpartisan election will be at the end of February. She has, I think, at least 6 challengers. And the final runoff between the top 2 finishers will be in early April. And she has at least 2 very significant challengers. One is a city council member named Ray Lopez, who I think you know a bit about. And the other is a name, I'm sure you've heard, Paul Vallis, who is a strong contender. He ran Chicago Public Schools under Mayor Daley. He's done important work in public education in Philadelphia and New Orleans. I think he ran the budget office in Chicago too under Daley or Emmanuel. I know Paul. I'm acquainted with Ray, and they're strong challengers. So we might very well end up with a new mayor. It's hard to predict. With such a large field, Lightfoot could make it through the primary. And people still tend to vote by race in Chicago. And in local elections, nearly 2/3 of registered voters sit it out because we intentionally schedule our Chicago municipal elections in odd-numbered years. It's a very devious thing the old Democratic machine instilled years ago. It's codified in state law. I have argued in my book and elsewhere, we're changing state law to allow Chicago to hold its elections at the exact same time as presidential contests, when typically we have 70% turnout in our local elections. So there could be a way that Lightfoot could squeak through, which many people would take as the end of days, considering all that has happened during this tumultuous first term of hers.
That first term has been a disaster, in your opinion?
Yes. To just be straight up. Yeah. I mean, I'll never say she's a bad person. What I do say, or that she's not intelligent, or that she did not have an impressive civic resume. She had all of those things. But crisis management is difficult. And admittedly, she got thrown 2 huge curveballs that I guess no one was expecting. One was COVID, and one was the aftermath of George Floyd, which many other cities struggled to deal with. But we were not ready from the get-go, and it got worse and worse. When 18 people were killed on May 31st, 2020 in Chicago, when 106 people were killed in July of 2020 in Chicago in the immediate aftermath of George Floyd, the course was set. And the question then was, would we pull out of this within a few months or a half year or a year? But then, Glenn, 2021 came along. Now, this year, there will be fewer murders than in 2021. And you can see the desperation as she and her police chief, David Brown, hold almost weekly briefings and cherry pick the minuscule shards of data that they can from the crime reports to make it look as though things are improving. The mantra is murders are down from last year. Yeah, a little bit, but last year was a record year, a recent record year for murders here in Chicago. They say shootings are down. Well, yeah, but shootings were extremely high last year. What about all the motor vehicle thefts this year? What about all the thefts? What about the carjackings escalating to a new high? So, they're grasping, and her tone, I haven't even talked about that, and I'm sure we won't spend too much time. Glenn, this is a city where hair trigger temper is an issue. Now, she got up in front of a crowd and publicly said, F Clarence Thomas. She has had numerous outbursts. There was one that was so vulgar, I can't even repeat it. She said, I have the biggest, insert word for male appendage, in this city. This was, I swear to God.
I heard a lot of black women say that in my time.
My God.
I don't know if that's a black woman thing. I don't know if that's a black woman thing, but they constantly talk about the size of their dicks like it's like. But anyways, what are your thoughts on this whole leadership of bad role models, modeling dysfunction, or something like that? You guys take it away.
Yeah, like
it's a Dahomey thing, basically. You're familiar with the Dahomey tribe. It's a Dahomey thing. So yeah, that's where that comes from. You got MOT.
holy shit. All right. So all this is political bullshit that always come out of right wingers' mouths, most likely white right wingers' mouths, as you would actually see. The mayor is not responsible for the crime that's being committed in the city. Nobody blamed the mayor of Oklahoma City whenever Timothy McVeigh murdered all those people with the Murrah building. Nobody blamed the mayor for that shit. There was the individuals who were actually responsible for the crime who are doing it. And when those people are responsible for the actual crime, they go to jail. There isn't people who commit crimes and they get off like the police do. Like most white right wingers love playing this edge when they talk about role models and all this kind of other stuff. But at the end of the day, when those people commit crimes and they find out who it is, they're going to jail. When the police commit crimes, we find out who it is, they get off. That's the difference between those two things. And yeah, the crime go up and it goes down. I don't think that's the mayor's fault. Or there's nothing that a mayor can do within the city that's going to stop somebody specifically that's going to be on some type of route that they're not even raising the actual person with, and all the kind of other thing that kind of dovetails into the the Democrat run cities type thing. But nobody blamed the mayor of Milwaukee when actual Jeffrey Dahmer did the shit that he did. That's what I'm saying about blaming actual political leaders for what individuals are doing. Like when all those people were dying of overdoses in Kentucky and Ohio, and they had to use refrigerated tractor trailers to actually refrigerate those people because they ran out of rooms in the morgue. Nobody blamed the mayor for those drug overdoses, and there was a lot of them. So it's like we keep blaming politicians for things that politicians are not responsible for it, and we're not blaming the actual individuals who actually go to jail whenever they commit these crimes, what they're actually for. It's just that it's a way of kind of switching the actual ball. I didn't know that Chicago actual politics were this kind of messed up to the point to where they're not holding an election day on election night and there's all this kind of primaries. That's news to me. I don't live in Chicago, so I don't know what the political situation is, and I believe the daily person is going to be elected because that's the most well connected people within the city, for at least that I do know. But it's just that you have to understand that you have to take race out of it. Crime is a specific group of people who are actually committing the crime. There are places in Chicago where actually no crime happens. What are we supposed to do? Hold those responsible for those people that are happening in that specific segment of the city? It's crazy. And you just should not be allowing people to be on TV or even the radio or anywhere else doing this type of stuff. When I lived in Germany, none of this type of bullshit happened. They never allowed you to categorize those type of people or have this cultural level of bullshit going on any type of public airways. And you were significantly sanctioned whenever you did do so. So it's just that we don't know how to actually criticize these issues the way it needs to be criticized, and then it jumps off into the culture war type thing. So I don't. It's kind of crazy to me. So.
100%. I assume those are your last words, unless you want anything else to add, and then we'll go to Game Changer.
No, that's it for that specific piece. So.
Got it. So yeah, we're gonna Game Changer on the whole Lori Lightfoot thing. You know the typical kind of role model modeling dysfunction, which you can say if you're just kind of writing the book of Deuteronomy or something, right? But does it bear upon crime and such? Is it relevant and stuff like that? What are your thoughts?
Wow, there's a lot there. I wanted to say something before I go, because I didn't get a chance last time to talk about the police salary portion, if I may, and how it causes corruptions with individual cops. I definitely feel that in many cities, especially places like New York, that police officers should get paid a lot more. From what I understand, it does cause the complications that MLT was talking about with with these kind of disgruntled assholes who really have a lot less to lose because their pay actually is very close to the standard pay. I was looking it up. So the average police officer salary, or the entry-level police officer salary in New York is $40,000. And as I understand it, it's significantly lower than the cost of living there, which means that they are subject to bribes. They're subject to other things. In Oakland, it's 60K, and it goes up to 100K very quickly there, as well as San Francisco and places like that. So I can see that as being a tremendous problem. Now, what was the question with the most recent thing?
Yeah, Lori Lightfoot. She's got the biggest D, this, that, and the other, her tone. Because it could be, the thing is, there's an anger problem, and people are shooting each other over kind of anger stuff. And then you have the mayor saying she has the biggest D. This is modeling this. You get the idea. Is this relevant at all?
Well, is she fat?
Yeah, she's
no. Lori is fit. Lori Lightfoot is fit.
Oh, she's fit. No, that is unusual, but yeah, I mean that goes into just women wanting to be men in a sense. You know, they want the power of men and they want the privilege of women, and they want the responsibility of neither. It's sad that exists, but it's not surprising, and it's also not surprising that people have elected her mayor of the city in a situation. But it does leave us vulnerable to criticisms from, in this particular case, a white guy who obviously has his own agenda, you know, from behaving like that. There is a sentiment that a lot of women feel that the rules simply don't apply to them. And that is the rules of etiquette to society, the rules of professional decorum. They feel that don't apply to them. They feel that they could shock their way through things like that. And I think that she's getting really cues like that from MLT. You're kind of like on some Darth Vader stuff right now.
What?
Brother.
Really?
Yeah, I can hear like I hear like breathing or something.
No, that's not from me.
Oh, it's not? Okay, my mistake.
No. What's going on?
Okay.
Go ahead, man.
Oh, maybe it was just me. Okay. But no, nevertheless, I do. We see this mentality a lot. I think that maybe it comes from Donald Trump just saying salacious things in order to, you know, just rally the base. We're at the point now that in politics that, you know, all press is good press, you know, and there really isn't a bar anymore for, you know, that we hold our leaders to. So that's what I have to say about the Lightfoot situation.
Okay, so let's get like some closing thoughts here on the whole thing. So there's certain warning signs, like businesses are leaving, but it's not businesses are not just leaving Chicago. You know, the businesses are leaving the North, generally speaking, whether they're leaving the parts of the Bay Area, like Elon Musk taking the stuff down to Austin, or, you know, office spaces getting empty in New York and whatnot. We combine that in Chicago with certain crime statistics and, you know, the 82% single motherism and all that type of stuff. And we're saying, hey, we going the way economically of Detroit, right? We started out talking about, you know, racial aspects, and then we got granular and actionable with regards to the police unions, bail, qualified immunity, and all that kind of stuff. But what are your final thoughts on, well, if Chicago is to, is it inevitable that Chicago will go down this particular sliding slope here? What are the chances that the kinds of things that you said, MOT, would be implemented, or anything that you want to say by way of closing on this conversation?
I mean, in closing, we have to treat this as a separate issue, not a people issue, because people are treated very differently based on who the clientele is to the actual criminal justice system. That's why you never heard me talk about the black on black crime aspect, because I know how similar crimes done by similar people are not even punished to the level of extent to where it is. Let me give you an example. Whenever somebody gets murdered for somebody black, a lot of people go to jail over it. Whenever somebody who's white who get murdered, maybe 2 or 3 people go to jail over it. The actual thing that could be prosecuted whenever it's black people is always prosecuted. Like 13 or 14 people may end up getting prosecuted over this specific type of thing, when there's only 2 or 3 people when it's white. And that's how they kind of up the actual numbers by doing things in that specific manner. But it's just that we as actual citizens has to be a lot more informed. Like I'm informed about it because I've been through it and I know how these things work. And the average person is not even interested like that. If everybody knew exactly what I knew about this actual system, this stuff would have been cleaned up and changed a long time ago. But when you have political apathy so high among people who want to just aim for moonshots rather than just fight for things that are actually fightable on an actual individual election cycle, it eventually turns out to being a moonshot later on. But we don't have the level and numbers of political engagement. We have more people spreading political ignorance and actually trying to depress people from being actually involved or picking a side or talking about dumbass issues that don't even amount to even what's even on the docket as their actual means of justifying their non-associating with the political process. I'm like, look, it's a democracy. You don't show up, you don't get no voice. You try to get a voice that you don't deserve before you actually show up, you still don't get a voice. It's still based on participation, and you have to show up every single time. Look, we don't have a problem understanding this when it's sports, but somehow when it's politics, we have a hard time picking a side, picking a conference, picking a team, knowing what's actually going on, know what the players are, know what the issues are. We can do this shit with entertainment. We can recite Love and Hip Hop 4 or 5 seasons of that bullshit. But when it comes to actual laws and rules and things that affect them, nobody knows what's going on. So I don't really care about the people who are not really being represented right now. You know, you can try this political saboteurism and try to take hostages, but no one wants to team with somebody who takes hostages after they take hostages. You're just going to be ignored and replaced by other people, which I endorse. Not even mess with black people at all unless they play the game like everybody else is playing. That's all I got to say. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you very much. Show up, play the game that is actually on the table as opposed to talking about pie in the sky. 100%. Now, game changer. What are your final thoughts on everything that we've been spoken about here with regards to Chicago, crime, and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, really, I do think that it is largely cultural, that there's a high crime rating in Chicago. I think that culture was created, it was born under the crack era, which was, relatively speaking, a very lucrative period in time for criminals. It was, and what we have now is a new generation of young people who want to live the lifestyle that they've seen their predecessor, who were criminals, live. You know, they want to be the Nino Brown. They want to be the, Frank Lucas. They want to be the Bumpy Johnson. We don't live in that era anymore. So what they're doing is that they are just trying to make a name for themselves as criminals, doing a lot of petty crimes, and a lot of violent crimes. There was a time when one didn't need to just drive up on people and pull a gun out and take their money. And really, I can't imagine there being much money in it. I mean, I don't keep, like, I think right now in my wallet, I have like $23 or some crap like that. Like, I don't really keep cash on me because, and I don't think you do either, Ike. I mean, like, nobody's walking around with their life savings in their pocket. So, they do that 10 times in an hour, and, there's a risk for armed robbery. You can go, to jail for a considerable amount of time just for $200. You're doing it for a reason other than money at that point. You're doing it because you want some type of street credibility, you want some type of thrill, you want some type of social status. So it will take some time for us to break away from that crack era culture, that glorified criminality. But until that happens, you're going to see the crime rate in Chicago be unnecessarily high.
Very well put there. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, MOT. Thank you, Game Changer. Thank everybody else that participated in this conversation. We hold fort here on Case Closed every week, and I have a show, Getting Ish Done, which is more about productivity, actual productivity. Case Closed, more on topical stuff, economy, so on and so forth. And in between, we may talk about certain other types of skills. So if it's your first time in the channel, go ahead and click that like button, subscribe button, the bells, and all that good stuff. Learn how to master your subjective consciousness and all that other stuff. But anyways, with this, we're gone. Peace. Let's go ahead and give you guys a, you know what? We're just going to end it like that. No outro. We're out. Thank you.
Peace.
Peace.